keeping on the topic of books, I know that when you travel, you carry books along with you and you give them out. And I know the Lord has used that small step of faithfulness in just some really powerful ways. I wonder if you could share a story or two on that.
Justin has a new book on divine appointments that he would... No, I'm kidding. For many years, I have been very convinced of divine appointments. Often before I travel, I'll ask the Lord, just put me next to the people on the plane you want me to be next to. Meet people in airports, meet people, taxi drivers. You want to meet people from all over the world that's taxi drivers. They had more opportunities to share the gospel, give a book. I usually have some of my smaller books along, usually something evangelistic, sometimes, different types of things. And I just, last week was in Charlotte, and there was a woman that I shared some things with. Actually, when I flew in here in Minneapolis, there was a woman in the airport who had asked me a question, and she was an older woman who was a little distraught because her baggage hadn't come in. And I told Nancy, I feel like I should go back to that woman and bring her book. So I took my book, 50 Days of Heaven, and I walked back to her. And as I was walking toward her, she's walking the other way, she fell. And so I came, and several other people came, and we were able to help her out. She was then they got a wheelchair for her. She was put into the wheelchair, and I'm talking with her and making sure she's okay. And she knows I'm the guy that she had talked with earlier about the baggage. So I looked at her and said, ma'am, the reason I came back was because I'm a writer. I just wanted to give you one of my books. I said, should I put it in your bag with your baggage here? Or her husband was there with her. She says, oh, no, I want it now. And so she sits there, she starts reading it, and then she's being wheeled away in the wheelchair. And I thought, now here's a woman who has, for one thing, she can actually read when she's walking, she's not walking through an airport, she's being wheeled through the airport. But secondly, she just had a scary experience that reminds her of her own mortality. And I see God do that over and over again. I one time was walking through the airport in Chicago, and there was a girl sitting there. She was reading her Bible, and I only had one book in my briefcase. And I always prayed, Lord, help me to have the right book for the right person. So, and it happened to be my novel, Safely Home, which I usually don't carry with me because it's a larger book. I usually carry the smaller ones. But I just felt like the Lord wanted me to give her this book. So I came over and I said, hi, you don't know me. I wrote this book, Safely Home. Here it is. I handed it to her, and I was kind of late for the connecting flight. And so she said, well, thanks. And that was it. Till about a year ago, I got an email from this, and this had happened shortly after the book came out, so maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so I get an email from this gal. The email comes from China. She said, you probably don't remember me, but I was in Chicago Airport, O'Hare, and you saw me reading my Bible, and you brought over and you gave me a copy of your novel, Safely. Well, I immediately remembered her. She says, I just wanted you to know, I read that book. God drew me to a deeper level of commitment to Christ, called me to study Mandarin Chinese, and I have come over as a missionary to China as a result of reading your book, And when you hear those stories, you just say, Lord, how gracious of you, and how easy for me. All I did was give a book. I'll throw one last one in there. We were on the plane on the way home from someplace, and these don't just happen on planes, but it's just the ones that are coming to mind. But there's a guy who was coming out to go to the University of Oregon, and he said he was Persian, of Persian descent. And he was an unbeliever. We're talking about different things. He's coming out to the University of Oregon, having a good chat with him, and I said, and this time I had my novel deadline, another novel I don't usually carry with me. And we had a good talked about the Lord, but he didn't get into a complete gospel presentation or anything. But I said, look, here's a novel I've written. It's got some spiritual dimensions in it. It's a murder mystery and all this kind of stuff. And you might enjoy it. And okay, that's the last I knew of this. I prayed for him for, the next few weeks or something like that. But then, people drop off your prayer list. You lose touch with them, all that. Well, I was speaking a couple of years ago at my home church in Oregon. this gal comes up to me and she says, "Are you Randy?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, I'm going to tell you a story. I know you don't know this because this guy told me he's never told you, never tried to contact you. But do you remember a guy, Persian guy, you gave him your novel?" "Oh, sure. Yeah, I remember him." And she says, "Well, he got down to the University of Oregon. Turns out he was one night early. He went to his room. Nobody was there. Nobody was there in the whole dorm. And he was totally by himself, totally bored. So he takes your book. He reads through your book through the night. In the middle of the night, when a character in the book, Jake Woods, is reading Mere Christianity, bows his knees, confesses his sins, gives his life to Christ, he says, this guy got down on his knees, confessed his sins, gave his life to Christ. And I'm hearing this, and I'm going, wow. But then she says this, and I want you to know that young man is the godliest man I have ever met. So in other words, it wasn't just like a conversion story, but how did it really bear out? But the fruit of the Spirit has been born in his life. Haven't met the guy. Maybe I won't meet him again. Since then, until heaven. But God is so gracious to do these things. And I think most of the stories we're not going to hear until we're there with him. And what a great thing that'll be.
Dr. Rosevere,